Mario Galaxy is one of the most popular Mario games, but honestly I rarely see discussion behind its sequel, Mario Galaxy 2. And honestly, I see why, dude, this game is really forgettable. Not bad at all, but it's just a complete definition of surface level good. But I guess I should talk about the game so I can explain why I've come to that conclusion. This game is a pretty huge improvement on Galaxy 1, as it's actually kinda fun. I think the reason why I see it that way is because the game focuses way more on the actual gameplay than the wow factor, which I can only assume was a choice made since the first game already did that. The level designs are way better for one, most of the bullshit is gone even if some of it is still intact. I forgot to mention this in the first Galaxy review, but 2D sections, while cool, don't take advantage of the 3D space you're building your game around, so they end up being pointless. But the levels are still good. The ideas are generally way more creative and well executed too, like these little girders you can ground pound on to go on the other side of the platform, or these snowballs in Freezy Flake Galaxy that make a snowpath on lava. Better level designs or better executions of ideas goes a real long way in making the game more enjoyable, hence why I actually found this game pretty good. We also have a bunch of new power-ups in this game. While most of the power-ups are from Galaxy 1, there are two new ones, starting with the Cloud Flower. The Cloud Flower is a really unique idea, allowing you to make platforms by using the spin move. That may sound overpowered, but the game only gives you 3 platforms that you can replenish by grabbing another Cloud Flower. A lot of people like to call this power-up overpowered, and I really have no fucking clue what they're talking about. I like to think these people thought it was in a lot more levels than it actually is, because really this power-up is in like 4 levels. While it does have an extremely floaty jump, nothing can really make up for the fact that it's once again built for select instances and not the whole game. The rock mushroom is way more forgettable in my opinion, and that may be due to the fact that it's only used in like 1 level, but seriously this idea has like no versatility. With a shake of the Wiimote, Mario will transform into a big boulder and roll forward quickly, killing basically anything in your path. The only real benefit you get to using this power-up is that there's a few crystals you can only break by using it, but that's really it. But even then, you really can't think of that many ideas using this thing. It's decently fun to use but has basically no potential. The power-ups from this game suffer from the same issue as in Galaxy 1, that they're built for select instances and not around the entire game, which sucks even more because the power-ups here are generally better than they were in that game. But there is one more sort of power-up I want to talk about. Yoshi. This may be his very first incarnation in the series where I actually like him. In Mario World he was too basic and overpowered, in Sunshine he was too simple, in Mario Wii he was once again too basic and overpowered and also only appeared in like 2 levels, but here they've got him basically perfect. First off, his ability to eat things is actually used as something other than just to dispose of enemies, since we've got many instances where we have to eat something and fire it back at a boss or fire it at an obstacle to break it. And I think that's really all they need to do to make him fun to use. But they also make him way more balanced, as while you don't immediately lose your Yoshi while you're hit, he does disappear after a few seconds, and also you do take damage, which is more than enough to make him balanced. They did a way better job with him here, and my only complaint is that once again he's just not used enough. I can recall maybe 5 levels that used him, which is a real shame. And most of the time he's only here so we can use these things, the fruits. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it, these things just suck ass, whether it be because of poor execution or just a shit idea to begin with. The dash pepper is probably the most forgivable. He makes Yoshi move really fast and even go up walls. This actually has a good bit of potential since you can easily form a lot of reactionary sections around dodging obstacles super fast. But it appears in like 2 levels. Yeah, well I can tell this power-up definitely has potential. It appears in basically no levels. It's a waste of a perfectly fine power-up. Now we're just at the dumb ones, starting with the blimp fruit. Using this makes your Yoshi turn into pyrocynical and ascend upwards until your air meter runs out, and you'll fall down after that. My main issue with it is that you can't choose when to float upwards. It does it automatically and you can't choose to go down. With better execution I can see this being good, but it really just sucks and can't be used in creative ways. And then we've got the final and worst one. The Bowberry fucking sucks, dude. It's just the dark levels all over it. All this does is let you see platforms in front of you that were invisible before. That's it, again, it's just the dark levels. This idea just sucks. When I'm playing a 3D platformer, I want to be constantly moving. This just makes me stop every 5 seconds because I think there's a pit that's going to be there, when there really isn't. This game would be better if it wasn't here. I'm glad it was only used in like 1 level. I don't want to talk about this shit anymore. Moving on. Yoshi is a really good power-up type thing, but again, he's really underutilized, which sucks, since he could have been one of my favorite power-ups. especially when you're fighting a boss with a man who can use a range attack. Hey, speaking of bosses, I swear this game has like half the amount of bosses as the first game, and yeah. I like a few of them, but most of them just end up being really forgettable or boring. By the way, much like the other games, I'm going to only cover a few of them. You encounter Pee-wee Piranha on the first star of the entire game. You gotta smack his butt to hit him, but my main problem is that it's just Dino Piranha from the first game. In that game you had to smack something that was behind him, and in this one you gotta smack his behind. Besides that, it's just too easy. King Lakitu is slightly better. He's more original for sure, but not great on his own. He throws spinies and you gotta shoot them back at him with Yoshi. My only issue here is that once again it's just really easy. His landing attack is super easy to dodge, and it's not likely you'll be getting hit by the spinies he throws. Just too easy. Diggeleg's name is one letter away from a racial slur, but his boss has a great idea. But once again he's just too easy. He'll fire these little drill guys at you from the other side of the planet, and you gotta use this drill thing to hit him once he exposes his weak spot. Great idea, but he needs another attack that isn't just the drill guys because they're way too easy to dodge. Gobblegut is decent. He charges towards you and occasionally eats into the ground, and after that you gotta hit his weak points. After hitting all of them he's dead. I actually have the complete opposite complaint with this one, as it's pretty hard for this early in the game. He's pretty fast and can be hard to dodge sometimes. Still, he's just decent. The Mega Hammer is the boss that had the most potential to me. He's really fun for quite a bit. He shoots bullet bills at you, and using Yoshi you gotta fire them at these weak spots. There's even a weak spot on his back, so you're required to use these launch stars to get behind him before he turns around. It's super fun for a while, but once you hit all 3 weak spots twice, another phase starts which just feels like filler, and it starts to drag at that point. He tilts his head forwards once he slams his hammer down on the ground, and you gotta shoot bullet bills at the glass when he does that. But I just feel like the boss drags on for too long, and the second phase is nowhere near as fun or in-depth as the first, and again just sucks. And again, the first phase is fun, but they ruined it and I shouldn't have expected anything else. And then we've got Bowser. I really liked the fight in Galaxy 1, it was great fun. And this one is it's a disappointment. Not that it's bad, it's one of the better fights, but for such a major boss in the game, you having to fight him multiple times, it fails at having as much depth as the Galaxy 1 fight, and it just kinda sucks in comparison. You're on this little planet and Bowser spawns these little asteroids to rain down on it. After that he punches the planet and makes the asteroids break off from it, to which you have to hit the asteroids back into him. It's just mindlessly easy. Bowser doesn't have nearly the amount of attacks as he does in Galaxy 1, and the attacks he does have are pretty easy to dodge. I'm not even going to talk about the final fight because I'll be honest, I didn't even finish the game. I got 2/3 of the way and called it quits. And I'll say why later, but all I really have to say right now is that I missed out on 4 normal bosses as well as the final Bowser fight, which sorta sucks. As for why I quit, well, the game just paused at Mario Galaxy 1 again. Near the end of World 4, the final level of the world is locked off behind a 40-star gate. I had 37, so I needed 3 more. But the thing is, other than the secret stars, I collected every single star from every previous level, so I'd either need to scour through the levels for a secret star, or grind for star bits to unlock what's presumably an optional level. Which one did I choose? Neither. While it wouldn't take terribly long, maybe an hour max to get the stars necessary, the game was already not great, and to be honest I was not looking to play much more of it anyway. It's not like you care, I mean it's Mario Galaxy 2, no one cares. I was originally gonna grind for star bits which basically act like coins, but seriously I could just not be bothered. You might be wondering, what about the secret stars? You could collect those. Bro, fuck that shit. I'm not going through an entire level to find a secret star with the chance I don't even find it anyway. I also don't even like how you access the levels anyway. In Mario Galaxy, you had an entire hub world to traverse to access the levels, but here you just step on a button that leads you to a world map akin to New Super Mario Bros, which is way less interesting. The hub world itself is way worse too. Still decent, but the Comet Observatory is basically impossible to beat, and they did not beat the Comet Observatory here. It's just the generic grass area that's half the size. It still works well in terms of function, but the charm is totally gone. Even Peach's Castle is probably better. In Galaxy 1, while you'd have your occasional unoriginal level theme, most themes were creative. In Galaxy 2, I'm just fucking around in either reused level themes or uninteresting locales. If I have to give a little bit of praise towards anything, it's that the backdrops are actually kinda unique for once. Well, it doesn't even feel like it takes place in space for half the game, rather just in the sky. I never minded it because it's a good change of pace. It's not just the vast emptiness of space, it's a little different. But still, the themes in this game are just whatever. The game still looks good though, but honestly it's getting redundant to say that since they all look good after Mario 64. But still, it looks pretty great. Probably one of the best looking games so far. I think I do prefer Galaxy 1 because again that game had more creative level themes, but this game still looks great. I also don't think I can give that much praise to the soundtrack. Again, basically all of Mario's soundtracks are good and this is essentially just Galaxy 1 soundtrack but more. And honestly, that's how I describe this game as a whole. It's basically just a DLC to Mario Galaxy. It's 100% the better game because of the better level designs and gimmick execution, but at the end of the day it's still more Mario Galaxy. Which, yeah, it's a fucking sequel, but it does enough good to make it like 10 times better than the first. I won't go on for much longer because again, it didn't even finish the game, but this game was good for so long. It just decided to throw in backtracking for the sake of padding the game out and it drags the game down a little. Which, by the way, before you comment that I can't put my opinion out there because I didn't finish the game, one, me not beating it didn't affect it in the ranking at all. It was always going to be there unless if it got better or worse in the last part of the game. And two, that's kind of just a dumb complaint. Like imagine you willingly go and play Bubsy 3D. You're probably gonna get maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 levels in and that's it. And you're not gonna play any more than that because it's such a terrible game, it's such an objectively bad game. And you are most definitely going to say that you hate that game because of how terrible it is, even if you didn't beat it. This one's going right in the middle of the ranking, just above, coincidentally, Mario Wii. I do think that the game had it a little worse since the good parts were at the end and not the start, but Galaxy 2 is just slightly more forgettable, and I highly doubt I'm going to see a game that's more forgettable for real this time. But the game is still slightly better. But Mario 3 was definitely a more consistent and memorable experience, and it didn't really have that many dumb decisions, along with it just standing on its own. I really had basically nothing to say about this game. I only had 31 notes on the game, which is pitiful compared to the 75 notes I had for Sunshine and the 62 notes I had for Mario 64. And I got 2/3 into this game. Even still, I found this to be a pretty decent experience. So what's next? Wow, I hear like no one talk about this game. Is this game just forgettable? Because really, no one talks about this game in terms of what the series has to offer. It's like they just forget about it. Still, I guess it's up to me to see what this game truly has to offer. But for now, I had fun. Nonetheless, I have no real reason to come back to Galaxy 2 given I'm gonna forget about basically anything I had on my adventure in the next 10 minutes. Is the next game any good? Time to find out. Despite Galaxy 2 being pretty decent, I think it's safe to say the other 3D games could have been a lot better. They had a whole lot of flaws and I think that's pretty apparent looking at my reviews for them or even just their places in the ranking. But despite that, I think Mario 3D Land is pretty good. If not having a pretty polarizing design choice I guess I'll get into now. The levels in this game are pretty great for the most part, honestly some of my favorite 3D levels yet. But notice how I said 3D. Yeah, the levels in this game are pretty weirdly designed, as they aren't your traditional 3D as seen in Mario 64 or any of the previous 3D games. It's like they designed it with a grid. Whenever there's a turn on the platform, it's always 45 degrees rather than freeform. I guess a better way to describe it is they took the 2D levels and converted them into 3D ones, as they're pretty basic and you'll often just be going forward rather than in any given direction. There's also almost never any segments where you can roam freely and do whatever you want. I can see why someone would like this. It's way simpler and sometimes people just need an extra bit of simplification to make a game more fun. But personally, I just like the free roam levels more. I'm sorry. It's not even like I care that much about the turns always being 90 or 45 degrees. I just don't like how cramped the levels are because there's almost never room to explore. It's almost the antithesis to Mario Galaxy. While that game was too open for its own good, this game is too cramped for its own good. Still, even though I don't like the level structure, the levels are pretty great. But the levels are just way too inconsistent to come to an objective conclusion on. Even though the levels are pretty good for the most part, they get pretty shitty near the end, and it has to do with the difficulty curve feeling arbitrary. Around halfway through World 6, the game gets hard. Really fucking hard. But the level design is hard in spite of it being designed poorly. Rather than actually putting in the effort to make the levels hard, all they really do is make a normal level but make the platforms smaller and have less of them. And the small platforms especially emphasize how shit the controls can be at their worst. The controls aren't horrible, they work really well for standard levels with big platforms, but when the platforms are small they don't work nearly as well. I don't know why it took me so long to put my finger on why that is since it's so obvious, but it's the acceleration. Basically, if you hold the run button down, you start at walking speed and then after around a second you abruptly speed up to running speed. This is very unsatisfying, however there aren't that many better ways to do it, so I don't blame the developers for choosing this route. My issue is the damn gaps. Much like any other Mario game, there's tons of places to fall and die. and they are exceedingly common, especially after the platforms get smaller. And obviously, the jumps get harder if you're not at running speed. I'm fine with all that. But my issue is that the gaps can get decently big for walking speed, and if you haven't reached that running speed, which mind you is very common since the platforms are tiny, it's a high chance you might die. This especially sucks if you think you're gonna reach running speed before you jump, so you just go for it and end up jumping off a ledge slow as hell and into a pit. A level that perfectly shows how bad the level design can get is 7-4. Takes place inside a clock. Look how tiny these platforms are. It's already a crime on its own that they are that small, but these platforms also rotate, which can throw you off. And they also take up a decent portion of the level. This level is absolutely terrible, and it shows how bad the problem really is. The Tanuki suit returning from Mario 3 fixes this, kinda. The Tanuki suit basically works the same as it did in Mario 3, albeit removing the ability to fly, which I'm totally fine with. It once again works as this game's jump corrector, but as a power-up you can obviously lose it, which is my main issue. On paper I don't mind the fact that you can lose it, but it being this game's only jump corrector is really dumb, and despite being this game's main selling point, you actually don't come across it very often. While using it by itself is pretty fun, losing it feels more detrimental than it really should. And that especially applies since there's only like 2 power-ups in this game. Like yeah, obviously we've got a classic mushroom and fire flower, and in rare situations you can get a star. But outside those, we've really only got the Tanuki suit and the boomerang flower. The boomerang flower is pretty fun while you're using it. As the name implies, it can shoot boomerangs and it's pretty satisfying to hit stuff. But the second you lose it, you're probably not going to see it anymore throughout the entirety of the game. Yeah, the boomerang flower has to be one of the most underutilized power-ups in the series. The first time it appears is in 5-1, over halfway through the game. And after that it doesn't appear much more. And that sucks too, again the boomerang flower is fun to use. But I guess Nintendo just forgot, which is a fucking shame. There is 2 other new power-ups, but they appear so rarely and are so similar to the Tanuki suit I can't even be bothered talking about them. Honestly, one of the most pedantic things I can say about the levels is how you enter them. In Mario 64, there was Peach's Castle, Sunshine had Delphina Square, and Galaxy of course had the fantastic Comet Observatory. But for as much as I talk shit on Mario 3D World's Hub World and the Mario World review, or the Hub World in Mario Galaxy 2, at least they had something. Here though, no. For fuck's sake, even Mario 3's world map was better than this. In fact, every previous Hub World was better than this. Here it's just a straight left to right path with each of the levels. I understand that this game is way simpler compared to the previous 3D Marios, but for as much as I thought Mario Galaxy 2's hub was forgettable, it's nothing compared to this. It functions, but that's not really much of a compliment. Honestly, despite me complaining a lot about the number of power-ups, it's not nearly as bad as the lack of bosses. There's 4 bosses. 4! You don't need to have a crazy high amount of bosses, but 4 bosses? That's nothing. You know you need to add more bosses when literal Mario Land has more bosses. Take Bowser appears in the first castle and you gotta go through this little obstacle course where he shoots fireballs at you. Kinda feels like a 3D take on the Mario 1 fight. I don't really have any complaints for this one other than the fact that you can just walk on the edge of the bridge. Boom Boom is way worse, he returns yet again. I swear, whenever this asshole pops up, you gotta fight him like 10 times because once again he keeps repeating throughout the game. It's definitely the less atrocious instance compared to Mario 3 since you only gotta fight him 3 times, but seriously, what is this guy's problem? But anyway, he spins his fists like a Beyblade and eventually gets tired. You can wait for him to get tired so you can hit him, but it's not too hard to hit him when he's spinning. This is way better than in Mario 3, but still pretty easy. But he gets a kind of companion in this entry because the next boss is Pom Pom. She's even worse. She throws boomerangs at you and it's way easier to hit her. At least Boom Boom attacked while moving and the attack went around him. It was actually a little bit hard. Here the attack is really slow and just goes forward. Really lame. My biggest problem with these 2 bosses is again they repeat 3 times each. Both bosses you fight twice on their own and then once together. This wouldn't be as big of a problem if there was at least 1 more boss. The final Bowser fight is way better. It's basically a chase sequence at this giant level and it's really cool. I don't really have much to say about this other than it's a good boss. I've noticed a trend where a lot of final Bowser fights aren't really boss fights. It's not really much of a boss since you never fight him, but it's still fun. And after that the game's over, just like that. You have this tiny gameplay segment afterwards where you just walk up to Peach who's tied to a flagpole, and after you touch the flagpole you fly off with Peach into the distance and the game just ends. It's super anticlimactic and feels off. But honestly I can't complain too much. Why? Because when you beat the game, you think you're all done. Then when you go back to your save file to collect more star medals, boom, 8 more worlds to explore just like that. The game just doubles the content and acts like nothing happens. I'm completely fine with it and the levels are good as usual, but I'm just so confused as to why they save the extra levels for after the game rather than just using the spare cartridge space just to make the main story longer. I wouldn't have complained about a longer main story either. The game is shockingly short at only around 3.5 hours, which is easily the shortest 3D game yet. And it's not even like I hate short games or anything. Sure, a lot of my favorite games are 30, 40 plus hours, but I don't mind a short and sweet game once in a while. It's just that short and sweet is not 3.5 hours. Around 30 of the minutes I spent playing the game was spent, well, being gated out of progression. Once again, is it just an obligation for 3D Marios to stop you from progressing at least once? Because it says a lot about the game length itself that padding is 100% necessary for the game to be long enough. But honestly, it might be the dumbest case of it so far because it's conveyed so horribly. See, in every standard level there are these big coins that are the equivalent of star coins in this game. You think these would just be mere optional collectibles given that you don't have to collect them. I mean, that's how it worked in New Super Mario Bros. But no, even though you're not forced to collect them in any fucking way, and the game doesn't even give you a hint that you need to collect them, you have to collect them. Because World 5 and World 8's castles are locked behind a certain number of them, meaning you gotta backtrack. Because much like New Super Mario Bros. DS, some optional levels are locked behind these things, so you'd think that the big coins are just for these optional levels given you don't have to get them. But then in World 5 it just drops it on you and it feels really dumb. In World 8 it's not nearly as bad given that you already know by now, but I was genuinely pissed off at World 5 because it's like, great, the game was going really well for 5 straight worlds and now it's pulling this shit again without even telling me. It's not even like they're that fun to collect, they're often in way more obvious spots and generally just aren't that clever. And when they are clever, it's just really easy to get them. There are some fun ones, but the majority feel like an afterthought. They kind of suck and are way less fun to collect. Honestly, one of my biggest complaints is getting pretty common at this point. It's really generic. Not much sticks out, though it is more creative than Mario Wii, I'll give it that. Even if that's not much of an accomplishment. But even still, it's really forgettable at the end of the day and I wish I didn't have to say that, especially since I enjoyed the game a lot. Presentation is good though, it looks very good for the hardware and it's very vibrant, if again, a little generic looking. It's not amazing, the only track that really sticks out is the overworld theme, but overall it's a pretty okay soundtrack. I'd say it's shocking how little I had to say about this game, but it really isn't. These games, no matter the quality, are becoming the exact same as each other. Even if the games are good, there's no reason for me to come back to them, they blend together so much. This is a tough one to recommend. It has a lot of good qualities, but at the end of the day, it's a very polarizing entry. While some love it, it splits the audience between people who like the new formula and people who like the old one. And hey, I can't blame those people. I'm sort of in the middle of it. I definitely like the old formula more, but I still had fun here. It's a tough decision, but I'm gonna have to put it above Mario World. I know it's absolute blasphemy to say that, but hey, I haven't played a lot of these before. Mario World's start is just alright to say the least. It's not amazing or shitty, it's right in the middle. But the last 2 worlds in that game are Mario perfection in my opinion. Mario World having a very mid start puts it just below 3D Land. Mario World got better as it went on, and Mario 3D Land got worse. There's no guarantee someone's going to play through the entirety of Mario World given how much better the last part is, but I think a lot of people will pick up 3D Land with no issue. But I am going to put 3D Land under Mario Land. 3D Land had slightly higher highs but way lower lows, and is generally a less consistent experience and also not nearly as visually pleasing, which puts it below. Seeing all these games in their rankings is making me realize just how common skewed opinions are in these games. I mean seriously, how many times has the general consensus misled me? Like 7 times? Because honestly, it seems like the games people like are going low on the list, and the ones people consider forgettable or not worth your time are going near the top. And 3D Land, while not many consider as a top 5, it was a very fun experience for me despite its many issues. What next? Awesome. This game is generally the least regarded in the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and while I don't necessarily think I'll have a bad time with it, there's a decent chance we're just gonna have a just okay game on our hands. But I guess it's unfair for me to judge if I haven't played. So, let's see what we've got.